Content creation is a lot like dating. You would never date somebody unless you knew they were kind, thoughtful, interesting, and a good person. In other words, their reputation is actually what makes you trust them or give them a shot. In the digital world that we all live in 2026, that is the equivalent of having a personal brand. It is simply how the world views you. But for generations before, we had to rely on parents, teachers, advisors, mentors, officials to advocate for us. Now we have the power of posting one piece of content, having the potential to reach thousands or millions of people all across the world that shares exactly who we are, what we stand for, and what we have to offer. If you can successfully build a personal brand, just like in dating, you would actually attract the best opportunities. And I'm about to walk you through exactly how you can do that with my own internal frameworks that I use daily. Step one, forget about the traditional way of niching and actually become the niche instead. If you've ever heard someone talk about niching, you've likely heard them say, choose a specific topic or industry and only create about that one topic. But the problem with that becomes, if you're known for one topic, as you evolve and have different interests and create about them, no one will engage. So instead, if you can actually become the niche, the great part is you'll always have longevity, you'll always have flexibility, you have a lot more versatility, and this is how you do it. It's through my creator vision framework. It's what I get paid to speak about wherever I go, and it really does encompass all of your content ideas in a way that's super aligned to you. So if that sounds good to you, let's break this down. So the creative vision framework here has three branches. You have your what, you have your who, and you have your why. In other words, your personal brand is the intersection of what you're saying, who you're saying it to, and ultimately why you're saying it. Let's first break down the branch what. This encompasses your message and the various content pillars you're using to share that message with, aka the various areas of your life that you feel that your message is present in. Now, the beauty behind this is that the content pillars give you variety of content ideas, but also your content still feels familiar because you have this overarching message or philosophy or ethos or approach that connects them. So for you to find that message, I would ask yourself these three questions. The first one being, do I have a contrarian view? Does my industry or does society say one thing and do I believe another? I just gave you an example of mine. I believe that you are the niche versus the idea of traditionally niching down. The second question, what change do I want my audience to experience? Well, for me, personal branding has completely changed my life and my family's life. So if I can give people a glimpse of what that feels like, then I would be very fulfilled. Where do people naturally turn to me for help? Objectively, when I think about my friends and my family, what do they come to me for? Not what do I want them to come to me for, but what do they actually come to me? Where do they find my expertise? And oftentimes it is around building a business online. It is oftentimes around building an audience online, aka personal branding. Now, if you hold on for just a little bit, I'll actually give you the 4 content pillars based on all of the data that I've encompassed over the course of me creating content for the last 6 years, in addition to helping thousands and thousands of students to make this actually significantly easier for you. But before I do that, let's go into the second branch, who. This is your target avatar. Who's on the opposing side of the screen? You have your demographic and your psychographic. Your demographic are a bit more obvious. These are factual. These are what a lot of your platforms actually already depict in their analytics tab. So your age, your location, the gender, the occupation. But then in addition, you have what is called psychographic. That prefix psycho refers to how an individual thinks or feels, right? It is actually understanding the brain of that other person that is watching your content. And that's important because the more you can call to their pains and their desires, the more that person is going to feel tended to, right? So for example, instead of you saying, this is how you make good content, you can be very descriptive as to who's behind that screen. You can say, if you are a mom that is really struggling with time management, I want you to understand this 5-minute scripting framework that is going to change everything for you. Much more descriptive to their psychographic. It makes somebody stop their scroll, especially if they're a mom that is going through time management issues. Now let's look at the third branch, why. And this is your story. Arguably the most important branch out of the 3. Because the moment you start sharing your story, something massively shifts. No longer are people championing your tips, but they're starting to champion you. Now the best way that you can tell stories is through my 3P framework called problem, pursuit, payoff. A problem is simply introducing the struggle that you encountered, then the pursuit is how you overcame that struggle, and ultimately the payoff is the final transformation. What did you learn? What was the insight gained? So all you'd need to do in order for you to have endless content ideas that fit in your personal brand is to fill all of this out. Let me go ahead and show you a filled out example of my own. And this is where I'll actually give you those 4 content pillars. So again, if I was to ask myself those 3 questions to find my message would read something along the lines of personal branding is the greatest long-term asset that anyone can build. Great. Then I go into the 4 pillars. And from all of my data, I really do believe to have a comprehensive and thorough personal brand that is super attractive and undeniable, it is these 4. You have your skill, you have your mindset, your lifestyle, and your passions. AKA, in other words, what you do, how you think, how you live, and what you love. And if you can create content about those 4 areas of your life, there's really great utility in the sense of building connection, rapport, trust with your audience. So when I look at skill, for me, content creation and digital products come into mind, and I'm just listing content topics right here. Then I'm looking at mindset, and I'm thinking, how do I personally think? How do I operate? And I think, okay, discipline is important to me, ownership is important to me. Then I'm going into lifestyle, right? Showcasing the behind the scenes of who I am and how I actually have routines in my life, right? So I want to walk the talk, in other words. So I'm showcasing, hey, you can actually balance this life of being a creator and entrepreneur, this creatorpreneur balance by scheduling and doing the batching technique that I will share, right? So for me, I believe that it's imperative that you're not somebody that just teaches, but you show that you actually follow through. Then you have passions, what you love. These act as connecting points to your audience. In other words, if you are somebody that has a favorite sport team, similar to another person that has that favorite sport team, you have something in common to speak on, right? So passions give you opportunities to connect with your audience even furthermore. So for me, it's wellness. I love to train. It's relationships, providing for my family, learning to be a better partner. And so all of these become content ideas that fit in this message, right? This message can be presented across these areas of my life. Great. Then I'm looking at target avatar, right? For me, demographic is quite clear. US and Asia, 1834, an equal split between men to women. I actually speak directly to working professionals, parents, business owners, and creators. Now I'm looking at pain, which are some areas that my audience is actually struggling with, right? They don't know what to post. They might have grown before, but they've now plateaued, or they have a fear of judgment. And some of their desires may be that they want to gain their first 10,000 followers, or they want to have a loyal community, or leave a meaningful impact. Then in terms of stories, again, I'm introducing various problems. The first one could be I outgrew my audience, so then I built a system to pivot content. Now I'm serving the right audience. Or it could be that I had a fear of being seen. Then I helped millions of people, and now I feel really confident in my value. Or I had no money growing up. I sold digital products to my audience, and now I became my family's first millionaire. You will see then what's beautiful is that I walk the talk. Like everything that I'm sharing with you is how I grew 5 million followers on Instagram and 8 million followers across my platforms. All of these actually become content ideas, content topics that you can create on, right? So you can make a piece of content that says, if you don't know what to post and you want to gain your first 10,000 followers, here's exactly your next 5-step plan. You could create a piece of content saying, if you're between the ages of 18 and 21 and you're really struggling with discipline, here's exactly what you need to do next. Or you can say something along the lines of, if you think it's impossible to balance both creating content and running a business, here's the batching method that I would recommend. You see how these become various topics that fit all underneath your umbrella of a personal brand. Look, I can go ahead and show you many more examples and actually do a much more detailed version of this. If you'd like, please let me know in the comments below. But for the sake of moving along, this is just step 1. So that's the creator vision. I would encourage every single one of you to make one and tag me in your stories and showcase it, because literally there are tens of thousands of people all across the world that are doing that today. I see it every single day, more and more people learning about my creator vision, and I want you to win with it too. Step 2 is learning about what's actually good content. Now, there's a very big difference between good versus bad content, and if I was to quickly summarize it for you, good content is actually audience first versus being selfish. It's clear and structured versus being vague and unstructured. It shares some type of value versus having no value to the viewer. It starts with a strong hook versus it's easy to scroll past. It takes the viewer on a journey versus being passive and forgettable. This table does a really good job of quickly summarizing the differences. But what is beautiful about content creation is I actually do believe it's a science. I believe it's a skill that can be learned. I believe that it is technical as any other skill in the world is. And most people don't see it like that. When you think about content creation, you think about creativity, spontaneity, inspiration, but I think about content creation as an engineered system. I think about it as something that you can break down and realize that the repeated patterns are showing up time and time and time again from the best creators. It's not because we're reinventing the wheel, but we understand what good formats look like. So I just want to show you one example of what that actually can entail, and then I would encourage you to follow along and see how detailed I study this, and then do that for yourselves for other contents too. I am the master of a specific type of content with short form, and it is called my silent film storytelling. It is where you tell your own story through B-roll, sound, and text. Every single day I'm scrolling through my Instagram Explore page, and I will find at least 5 to 10 different reels of people copying this storytelling template that I've given people, and they will tag me as inspiration. And it is quite a beautiful experience to encounter. And it's because throughout my free events, it's because throughout my YouTube videos, throughout my Instagram reels, I've actually given this away because I want people to win. And now I'm going to give it away for another time. I really encourage you to check this out. And there's actually copyright issues, so we can't play the sound of the video. But if you want to, please go ahead and click the description box. You will see a link to one of the Instagram reels that I've posted, and you will understand exactly what I mean. So if you actually want to take this seriously, I would encourage you to watch that first before you hear my breakdown. But anyways, let's go into how I've broken down this video. So everyone will see this piece of content and think to themselves, oh, it won because it was relatable or it was vulnerable. And it's the worst thing to ever say, because how in the world are you going to emulate that? How objective is the idea of being vulnerable or relatable? In other words, if I told you that, how the heck would you follow through with it? I would be the worst teacher in the world. Versus there's actually tangible features of that format that I am checking off in my brain, and that is why I consistently go viral with that exact same format. The first one is the idea that that initial beginning of the video needs to start with the struggle. And that means that you have a visual and a text hook that both highlight the pain that you've endured. So is it that you've gone through a breakup? Is it that you were burnt out? Is it that you faced financial hardship? It's because everyone as human beings, our common denominator is struggle. All of us have encountered pain in some parts of our lives. And so if you're constantly starting your content with you flexing your fancy watches and your lavish lifestyle and your Lamborghini, and you wonder why no one cares about you, it's because literally no one cares about you. Instead, if you begin with struggle, there's great power in that, because immediately you find people championing your story and they actually want you to win. In other words, they'll actually be retained on that piece of content. Then step 2, you should always try to use a sound with a rising action. Why? Because it insinuates a payoff. You're not going to have a rising action without knowing that there's going to be a moment in which that beat drops, and then ultimately that transformation will actually ensue. Step 3 is adding a timestamp. So for me, all the time, I will add either a year or a month, or maybe even a specific period of my life or an age, because it insinuates to people, okay, there's going to be a logical progression that occurs. I am not going to just put on to my video out of nowhere 2012 without people knowing that there's going to be obviously a transformation yet to come. So it's going to insinuate a payoff, meaning the retention is going to be held. Step 4, I perfect the pacing. This is where most people go wrong. They think that short form content is always fast and that they have a lot of cuts to them. But the problem is there's a fine line between fast and also too jarring, right? So you want something engaging. To be engaging, you have to actually read each frame aloud and actually get through that entire sentence or line before the frame moves on. So if you want to do a very quick test before you post your videos, make sure you can speak aloud each line before that frame moves on, and then you know it has good cadence. You also don't want to be waiting on each frame too long either. You want to just be able to finish that sentence aloud so that the next frame can move on. Now, step 3 is quite important because this is where it comes together and it allows you to have clarity on a week-by-week basis, and that is ultimately your content planner. Truth be told, all I do for my content planner is have 3 rows. The first row is idea, the second row is format, and the third row is intensity. Now, what I mean by intensity is how difficult, how much energy does it actually require for me to make that video? I would think that sub 1 hour to make a video is actually called low intensity, and beyond an hour, especially above 2 hours, is where you go into medium to high intensity territories. For me, I always recommend that you should go 1 to 2 medium to high intensity formats and 5 low intensity formats. So then I will document that. I will put my ideas based on the creator vision that we just went over, right? In step 1, that was the creator vision, right? The practice of looking at topics, extrapolating them for ideas. Great. Then I'm looking at studying the formats like I showed you in step 2. So step 1, step 2 come together, and you add the intensities the way that I have just mentioned, and now you have a content planner that gives you clarity on a week-by-week basis. So this is something that I've done for myself time and time again. So you see here for my creator vision, I have multiple ideas from my framework that I filled out above. I have different formats, and again, I have 5 low intensities and 2 high intensities. And this is really great for sustaining your success or sustaining your energy levels without burning out. Step 4, this is where you start to analyze what works and what doesn't. When it does work, you should actually double down on it and repurpose its format and messaging. People get so afraid of repurposing or even sometimes blatantly reposting their own content because they feel as though it's redundant or it's lazy. I want to give you permission to do this because it's actually really powerful. As a creator, once you start to have more successful formats and messaging in your arsenal or your repertoire, it becomes easier for you to sustain your level of success for the long term. So here's a really great example, right? These are all very much repurposed videos that have very, 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 very close storylines. It's actually the silent film storytelling format, and you have 22.9 million views. You have 32.8 million views, 3.6 million, 4.4 million, 909,000 and 709,000. These 2 are on TikTok and the others are on Instagram. But you can see how once I learned this format, the silent film storytelling, I am repurposing it in order for me to sustain my level of success without having to start from scratch. And these are literally just reposts, right? They're the exact same pieces of content, and you can look across the board. All of them have millions of views. It's because content creation is a science. Once you understand the formula, the way that I'm breaking it down, from creative vision to studying the various formats, I already gave you one template. Content creation becomes controllable. It becomes something that you know that you can have a higher predictability for success. Look, the algorithm is not perfect in the sense where you can always guess it, but it does allow you, when you study it, to have more control over that process. So maybe your hit rate or your success rate goes from, let's say, having one successful video throughout the week to knowing that at least 3 or 4 of them are probably going to be good. That allows you to really increase your audience size and build even more connection at great scale. With that being said, those 4 steps are exactly how you're going to be building a personal brand in 2026. I am not a theorist. I am a practitioner. I do every little bit of what I say, and you can see how in detail I study it. So if this is something of interest for you, please leave your comments below. If there's certain areas that you want me to create a more specific or thorough video on, I'm more than happy to do that. And give this video, of course, a thumbs up, and of course, subscribe, because there's gonna be a lot more personal branding content coming your way. I really do believe that this is the opportunity, and I don't know if there's anyone more experienced to actually teach it. So I'm super excited to do this for you guys, and I can't wait to see all of your guys' wins.